On April 15th, 2013, Rebekah Gregory sat with her 5-year-old son at the finish line of the Boston Marathon, watching the runners cross the finish line and cheering them on. A mere 3 feet behind her in a backpack, a bomb exploded in what we now know is an act of terrorism. All around them, people were injured and dying, and Rebekah herself had a very severe injury to her leg as well as multiple other injuries. Her 5-year-old son had non-life-threatening but significant injuries as well. Today, Rebekah's here to talk to us about the Boston Marathon, about being a survivor, and most relevant to this channel, about pregnancy before and after the bombing, labor and delivery before and after losing her leg, and what life is like being a mom and a Boston Marathon survivor. If you'll just give a quick introduction to my audience about who you are and why we're chatting today, and then we'll hop into the interview.
It's an honor to be with you. My name's Rebekah Gregory, and in 2013, I was 3 feet away from the first bomb that went off at the Boston Marathon. Everyone always thinks that I was running in the marathon, but I was on the sidelines eating chocolate-covered pretzels, wondering why anyone runs that many miles.
I'm really happy that someone else feels like that about running marathons, because that's how I feel. Tell me a little bit about your family, because to my understanding, your son was with you when this happened.
I had gone up to watch a friend of ours run in the marathon, and my 5-year-old son I took with me, and we had started out the day at the 17-mile marker, and then everyone said, hey, let's get closer to the finish line. We were in a group of about 9 people, and of course no one tells you that when you go to watch someone else run a marathon, you end up running the same marathon along with them. And so that was fun for a while, and then Noah got really bored, and I remember him tugging on my clothes and saying, Mom, I'm so bored. When are we going to leave? And at that point in time, I didn't know myself. And so I was thinking, I said, I've got to figure out a way to, make him happy, but also see our runner cross and him not get lost in the crowd. And so I just said, buddy, why don't you sit down on my feet and play in the rocks like you're a scientist? And of course, there were no rocks. We were on asphalt, but to a 5-year-old, that was a cool thing to do. And so he took his place on my feet with his back up against my shins. And that's exactly where my little boy was when a bomb in a backpack went off 3 feet behind us.
Wow. So would he have been more significantly injured if he hadn't been in front of your leg?
He would have probably died that day, because what happened is my body was essentially a shield for him. So I was able to take everything in the back of the legs, the torso, and the left hand. And that's what kept him from experiencing all of those thousands of pieces of shrapnel. So as we're talking today, I've had 7 different surgeries. I'm getting ready to have my next one. I lost my leg below the knee, but my son only had 2 pieces of shrapnel hit him. So he had one in the back of his head, and he's got a little bald spot. And then he had one on his right leg that they were able to stitch up, but that was it. And I still have hundreds of pieces that cause damage to my body every single day.
Wow. I've heard your story before kind of secondhand, but hearing you tell it is truly just incredible. And we can talk a little bit about like the physical things, and obviously want to get into the pregnancy before and after this happened, but I would imagine that even despite those significant physical injuries, that the mental injuries were even worse. How are you and Noah doing from that regard?
So we're doing really well, but I'm glad that you brought that up, because the emotional outweighs the physical every single day. And I can sit here and tell you how hard it's been to go through all the surgeries and just the pain associated. But when I go back to that day in Boston, I remember laying on the sidewalk fighting for every single breath that I still had. And I could only move my head. And so I was panning around to try to find my son, but my bones were laying next to me on the sidewalk. I was in a pool of my own blood. There were nails, ball bearings, BBs, everything that these brothers packed into these pressure cooker bombs, and other people's body parts laying around me, not even attached to them. So it's one thing to talk about our physical journey, but that's the part that is haunting. But luckily, we are very, very big mental health advocates, and we've gotten a lot of help and healing through therapy, and it's really saved both of our lives.
That's amazing. So if you could say one thing to someone who's been through something traumatic, and obviously we know that people's, spectrum of trauma varies significantly, and that if someone's watching this and they've been through something that was traumatic for them, they shouldn't hear your story of extreme trauma and think that that minimizes theirs. What would you tell them about seeking help, about who to talk to?
It certainly doesn't minimize it. And I always say that the majority of people will never get blown up by a bomb in a marathon, but every single person has life blow up in their face. And I think that this year, especially, we're seeing what a collective trauma looks like, and many people are suffering. But there are ways that you can reprocess your most traumatic memories. We have an organization called Rebekah's Angels where we provide funding for mental health treatment for children and families that have experienced trauma. And we use what's called accelerated resolution therapy, because what happens with trauma and PTSD is that you are stuck in this fight or flight mode and your body is just braced for an attack. And so afterwards, I would be scared to leave the house, or I would have to go to the airport, and I would be terrified of backpacks and suitcases because I would automatically associate those with bombs and fireworks, or even eating s'mores with my family. I couldn't do because of the smell of the campfire. There's ways to help, and we are certainly living proof that life is beautiful after trauma too.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll put a link to Rebekah's Angels in the description below, along with your social media and all of that. I will donate a portion of any ad revenue if this video gets monetized. Sometimes on YouTube, they don't monetize things that are about real sensitive events, but at least $1,000 to Rebekah's Angels too. So that's a great purpose. Let's jump into a little bit about your pregnancies. I know you have Noah, who was there with you that day, and then now you have another daughter as well?
I do, Riley.
Okay, so tell me, what were some of the differences before and after, the bombing, and as well as losing your leg, about the differences in your pregnancies?
Well, the big thing was that doctors told me after the bombing, I spent 56 days in the hospital initially. And one of the things they said is, Rebekah, I'm so sorry, based on your internal injuries, we don't believe that you will ever be able to have another baby again.
Do you know what some of those injuries were that they were thinking would cause that?
I had a lot of shrapnel in and around my ovaries, my uterus, everything basically. So they thought that it would be very hard for me to conceive. And then if I did, I would most definitely lose the baby. And so as traumatic as that was, it wasn't my focus at the time, because my entire life was blown apart, and they were coming in and putting my body back together every single day, just piecing me back together. But when after this, when I lost my leg and went through all the surgeries for a year and a half, and in 2015, I was doing pretty well. I had just gotten married and to my college sweetheart, and we really wanted a baby. And it came as kind of a surprise because I didn't think that I would be able to have one. And so we went to the doctor, and sure enough, she said, you're pregnant. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then this fear came over me because I remembered everything that the doctors had said about it. And so it was high risk right from the beginning, which was different, but also it was just a really amazing time, because I thought to myself, in 2013, I was 3 feet from a bomb that should have killed both my son and I. And here I am in this new, beautiful life, and I get to have another baby.
You touch on something really important that I go over with a lot of my patients, people who've had even pregnancy loss or any kind of trauma, that once you kind of exit this pregnancy is an easy, happy bubble, you don't ever get to go back into it. And it sounds like you experienced that as well, just from being nervous regarding the things that you had been told. Did the pregnancy end up being more complicated, or what would you highlight as some of the things that made it different than being pregnant before all of this?
So the whole one leg thing makes it interesting. And I have to be really careful. I think one of the things as far as like gaining weight. So I know that if I gain even a couple of pounds, my leg fits differently. And because of pregnancy and swelling and other issues that I already have, I have to think about that a lot. I was still trying to be active. Exercise is a big part of my life, but it was hard. I mean, it was painful on my leg. I know that I was probably out of my leg more oftentimes than I was in it. And I often joke that her name is Felicia, by the way, because of I wish I had Felicia's life. She's always going somewhere. And so when I got my leg, I wrapped her up in a baby blanket. I made a birth announcement because she was a new member of my family. It was tough. There were a lot of things that were easy too. I mean, my pregnancy in general for the first couple of months went by really seamlessly. Even though I was high risk, I was having more doctor's appointments. All in all, it was really, really good.
Good, that's good to hear. So with regards to the prosthetic leg, I haven't had a lot of patients who have been pregnant with that, but I've had a few. I would say the biggest problem that we would run into is difficulties with fitting. Even if you gain a normal amount of weight, there's some swelling in pregnancy that's very common. Did you have any problems with mobility towards the end because of problems with the prosthetic, or were you able to tackle that?
I was able to tackle that, and I owe a lot of that to my doctors, my prosthetists, because they were, really, really mindful of the fact that they wanted me to be as comfortable as possible. So I would encourage anyone who's an amputee and has a prosthetic leg or two, to really just go into your prosthetist as often as you can if you have any sort of issue, because a minor tweak is a really, really big thing when you're an amputee. It could be just a silly little minor thing, but it can be affecting you in a really big way.
That's great advice. And I try to tell my patients we need to be proactive about this, not reactive. So before you start having problems, you need to get in with your process and make sure we're tackling it head on.
Absolutely.
So is there anything that you would say if a medical professional is watching this, something that you would want them to know that made, being pregnant in a high risk situation better for you, or even something that someone did that maybe you would say like, don't do that?
I think the amount of compassion that I had throughout my pregnancy, I had a wonderful OBGYN, and she just told me, she said, Rebekah, this is part of your life. The Boston Marathon bombing is part of it, but you are so much more than that. And I believe that you are going to deliver a healthy baby. And she reminded me of that every time I walked into her office, because I tried to be very positive about it. And I knew that the amount of stress that I was maybe putting on my body wasn't good. So I did things to try to alleviate that stress and try not to worry, because at the end of the day, I feel like there's so many different things that we can worry about, but our blessings and the good stuff in our lives always, always outweigh the bad.
That's great. I love to hear about people having good OBGYNs, because obviously that's one of my main goals on the internet, is to show people that we're out there and that we're passionate about what we do and that we love our patients. And I love hearing that corroborated from others who've had good experiences.
The amount of compassion and really treating me as Rebekah and not just another patient was huge. At the 7-month mark, I started to develop a really just small back pain. And it wasn't even painful. It was just this feeling that something might not be right. I told my husband, I said, I'm getting a little bit of pain in my back. I think we might need to go get this checked out. My doctor, we called her, and immediately she said, absolutely, go to the hospital right now. I'll meet you. And it ended up being me going into preterm labor. And we would have had no idea, but my doctor was very, very good about making sure to go to the hospital and getting checked out.
Had you had that with your previous pregnancy, or was this new?
My son came at 36 weeks, and so he was just a little bit early, but the only complication he really had was he was jaundice.
How many weeks were you with your daughter when you started having
I just turned 32 weeks, and so she was pretty early, and that I got really, really sick all of a sudden. And so it started with just a tweak in my back that I felt like I might have done something to it. And then going into the hospital and immediately them saying, no, you're in preterm labor, then trying to stop it. And then my blood pressure dropped, it bottomed out. They had to give me several blood transfusions. I was just so, so sick. And they thought that I might have a pulmonary embolism. And so that was really scary. And they just couldn't figure out what was happening, but they knew that they weren't going to be able to keep my daughter Riley in for much longer.
Wow. Okay. So for the people who are watching, the difference between preterm labor at 32 weeks and 36 weeks from an obstetric standpoint is at 32 weeks, we will do a lot of medications and hospitalizations and things like that to try to prevent delivery from happening. And we do those measures up until about 34 weeks. And after that, we kind of, do the best we can to make things as good as possible, but we don't try really hard to keep babies in because they generally do well after 34 weeks. But that 32 to 34 week mark is kind of a transformative point in a fetus's life where they're really developing their lungs and learning how to keep their temperature. And it's much better for them to stay in unless obviously there's something going on outside. How long were you in the hospital from the time that you were admitted for the back pain until Riley ended up being born?
They were able to keep her in 3 more days, which was really significant to that time period. And we were thankful, but I was getting so, so sick that they were afraid I was going to lose my life before I delivered her.
So those 3 days are really important. I tell my preemie parents every day that baby can stay inside is 2 days that we don't spend in the NICU. So it's very valuable when we can keep premature babies in. And also those 72 hours are enough time to get, I'm assuming, some steroid injections to help with Riley's lung development, which hopefully helped her once she was out. You mentioned that they thought you might have a pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot that happens in the lungs and can be life-threatening. Did they think that because of your presentation? I'm wondering if maybe the amputation itself had anything to do with their concern with that, because we do get a little bit worried about venous stasis and circulation issues in some of our amputee patients. But is that ended up being what it was, or was it something different?
Sometimes I'm like a guinea pig to people because they don't often know what to do with me. I mean, I have all of this shrapnel in my body. Of course, when I fill out my medical forms, it's, I got blown up by a bomb in 2013. And so they kind of chalked it up to my injuries from that. It was interesting because you said that it's so important to have a good OBGYN and a good medical team. The only negative part of my experience with my delivery with Riley is there was this one particular doctor who had absolutely no bedside manner. I'm in a bed and they're telling me the worst possible thing, and she's basically telling me that I'm going to die and my daughter's going to die too. It was just the way it was presented to me. I appreciate upfront honesty. This was more of just very brash. It is what it is. If your daughter comes today, she's going to die. And I'm like, what?
I don't work with residents and medical students anymore, but when I did, I was always, wanting them to learn. It's important to tell your patients the truth and what's going on and be, upfront with them and not beat around the bush. But it's important to do that in a way that shows that you're compassionate and on their team and doing everything in your power to prevent a bad outcome when possible. And you have to learn how to balance that when you're with a patient and explain to them things in plain language in ways that feel compassionate to them. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think that's important for people to hear.
I tried not to let it bother me. I don't know what that woman's day was like. I don't know what kind of issues that she was having in her own life, but the amount of compassion that has really grown in me the last 7.5 years, it just made me understand that whatever was going on didn't have anything to do with me. And she was upset and stressed because the situation was stressful. But I believe it could have been handled a little bit differently. But then again, I had a wonderful, wonderful doctor that ended up delivering Riley, and a wonderful team of nurses. So I'm still very thankful.
So it sounds like you've gotten to the point where we know Riley's coming today. And what was the process after that?
They told me that I had just a few minutes to be able to deliver her. Otherwise, they were going to have to do a C-section because I was getting really sick. They didn't know that if I even had enough in me to be able to have a vaginal delivery, but that was what we wanted to do. It was crazy because I ended up getting her out in 14 and a half minutes.
Wow. Did you push a lot longer than that with Noah?
His was pretty quick. I can't remember exactly how long. It was a lot more than 14 and a half minutes.
Not that fast. Was there any difference between delivery, before your amputation and after, or was it pretty much the same?
It was pretty much the same, except my husband is so funny because during all of this, I mean, it was very stressful and everyone was sad. We had nurses crying and giving me hugs. And it was so funny because I'll never forget this one moment where I couldn't feel, when they gave me my epidural, I couldn't feel my legs at all, obviously. And so, but I was so uncomfortable because of the phantom pain that I was experiencing too. And so it was a really weird dynamic between the two. And so I was trying to get up in the bed to be able to kind of like move a little to try to get more comfortable. And I said to the nurses, I said, I can't feel my legs. And my husband, without skipping a beat, he said, "You ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dan." It's like the best impression of it. And so here we are, in this like highly stressed out situation, and my husband is quoting a movie line from Lieutenant. It was hilarious.
That's so funny. And that is something actually that kind of drew me to you. A lot of your social media takes a very lighthearted and positive view on something. I mean, honestly, if we get down in the nitty gritty of it, something truly horrific happened to you. And you're able to take that and create good and spread positivity. And that's a trait that I think is really important and I love to see. So applauding you for doing such great work there. So Riley was born. Did she end up spending some time in the NICU after that?
I did. One of the things that was really hard right off the bat, and we're thankful that she was able to have the steroid injections to mature her lungs, because she still had issues with underdeveloped lungs. And so she was immediately placed on a ventilator in the NICU. And the first couple of weeks were very, very touch and go. It was scary. The minute that she came out, they kind of showed her to me and then she was whisked away, which was really difficult to not even be able to hold my baby. And so then we went down to the NICU as soon as I was feeling better, because immediately my body and all of my symptoms started to change. As soon as she got out, it was like I was fine. And so that was good, because then I was able to focus all of my energy and time on her, as well as my husband and my family.
Did they ever figure out exactly what made you sick or what caused the preterm labor? Because needing blood transfusions is a kind of a unique situation when there's not anything going on that explains the bleeding. Or if there was bleeding, I mean.
We still don't know exactly what happened. I started going downhill really, really fast. And so I was losing a lot of blood. My blood pressure had bottomed out. I was just throwing up anything that they would put in me. So it was just a really weird situation.
It's fascinating. I'm just trying to put myself in that situation if I was, the person at the bedside. Did they think, I think you've mentioned in another interview that they thought maybe it was a placental abruption. Not in that same vein, but that brought up in my mind, if you have shrapnel other places, if there could be any kind of injury that's causing bleeding somewhere else, that would definitely be at the forefront of my mind if I was, the person taking care of you. I'm assuming you can't do MRI type imaging though, because of the magnetic.
Exactly.
Yeah. So for the viewers who are watching, MRI uses really strong magnets, and people with any kind of metal implants, and then obviously people who have been in situations where they have shrapnel now, if you put them in an MRI machine, those magnets will move those metals around and it can be extremely dangerous. So that's an interesting point I'm sure that some people watching would want to know. How much did Riley weigh when she was born?
Riley was actually 5 pounds, so it was a pretty good weight. She lost quite a bit in the NICU initially, but then she was on the ventilator. She had she had to be in the little incubator and we couldn't touch her. But on Mother's Day was the first day that I actually got to hold my daughter, which was really, really special.
What a perfect day to get to hold her the first time.
Yeah, it will always be the memory that I cherish most. Mother's Day is so special anyway. And I think that both of my kids are just miracles, and there's a reason they're both still here, because they have huge testimonies at such young ages. But I'm just so thankful. And that's what we focus on. I look at my life, and 6 months before Boston, I got held up in a Walmart parking lot and robbed at gunpoint. I thought that was going to be the biggest highlight.
Oh my gosh.
And I've had a lifetime of trauma, and there are so many different things that I can touch on where I almost lost my life or something more should have happened. But when I look at my kids and them being able to be here and thrive the way that they do, it's just a blessing to be able to watch them grow every single day. And no matter what is going on in my life, especially now with all of these health issues, every day that I still wake up means I have so much purpose. So anyone that is struggling or hurting right now, I just encourage them to be reminded of the same thing. As long as we are breathing, there is still so much more purpose for us being here than we could ever comprehend.
Was your recovery any different after the birth than you remembered it being with Noah, or was it about the same?
It was about the same. The biggest thing is that, not having a leg, I couldn't put my leg on right away after giving birth because of the swelling. So it took a little bit of time to do that. So just the inconveniences of getting in the wheelchair versus being able to walk, and, just like the everyday things that I think amputees have to deal with that are not necessarily normal, but they're normal to us now as one-leggers. So it was just that, but really, all in all, it was pretty easy.
I really appreciate you being here today and sharing your story. I will put links to Rebekah's Angels and to your social medias in the description box below. Is there anything else you would like to say, or anything you want my audience to know before we end this?
I don't think so. This has been great. And I appreciate all that you do and using your platform for good too. You touched on mine a little bit, but the way that you make people feel so comfortable, I've been binging your videos and catching up, and I love it, because I think that everything that you share is so necessary, but a lot of people are really uncomfortable to talk about it. And so just being able to get online and look at stuff and be educated, that's a really amazing thing. So I feel honored to be connected to you and call you my friend now.
Thank you so much for being here today, Rebekah. I will put links to Rebekah's social media platforms in the description box below if you'd like to check those out. Be kind to yourself, to each other, to me. In the comments, be kind, and I will see you next time.